The title of this presentation is Steps to Commercialization of Point-of-Care Technologies. My name is Praveen Soni. I'm founder and president of Pharma CRO. Pharma CRO is a consulting company that provides product development consulting services to the medical device and drug delivery industry. This presentation will cover the following. Number one, an overview of the development of a point-of-care device from idea to a commercial product. Number two, summary of the stages involved in the product development process. These stages include idea screening, concept feasibility, product development, design verification and validation, regulatory approval, and product launch. It should be noted that the intent of this short presentation is to provide a high-level overview of the steps toward commercialization. Needless to say, the details involved in each of the steps are extensive and cannot be covered in such a short period. The learning objectives for this presentation are threefold. First, to achieve an understanding of how an idea is developed from concept to a commercial product. Second, to gain a general understanding of the product development process. And third, to get a high-level view of the stages involved in product development. This sketch provides an overview of the evolution of an idea for a point-of-care device to a commercial product. The process involves 6 distinct stages, each of which will be discussed in some detail later on in the presentation. For now, briefly, stage 1 involves screening of the ideas that may originate from a variety of sources. The objective of the screening process is to reduce the concepts to one that has the highest likelihood of success. Stage 2 involves the selection of the concept and feasibility testing. This would involve prototype fabrication and testing to establish feasibility of successful development of the device with the desired features. Stage 3 is the most important stage in which a majority of the critical work is conducted, including design and manufacturing process development. The chosen concept is developed into a product in this stage. In stage 4, after development is complete, the design is tested to the established specifications, and this is referred to as design verification. The device is also tested in the expected use conditions to ensure that it meets the user needs, and this is referred to as design validation. Following design verification and validation, the development results are summarized in a regulatory submission package, the format and content of which is dictated by regulatory requirements. Following regulatory approval in stage 6, the product is ready for launch. The sketch in this slide provides a perspective of the development process. In order for the point-of-care technology device concept to be successful in the marketplace, it is important that it address unmet user needs and that there is a significant commercial opportunity for the device. Based on these important considerations, the device design concept is selected for development and subsequent commercialization. As product development proceeds and the design matures, the project risk is reduced and the value associated with the product increases. An important part of the development process is interactive involvement of a number of functions, including design, manufacturing, marketing, regulatory, clinical, quality, and finance. The details of the activities, the budgets, and the timelines are managed by the project manager, who plays a key role in ensuring that the goals are met on time and on budget. Let us now turn to the first stage of development, namely idea screening. The first step in screening of a device idea is assessing its market potential. This will determine how well the device will be accepted in the marketplace and how it will be positioned versus the competition. As part of the assessment of market needs for the product, it is necessary to categorize the niche that the device would occupy, because this information will be needed in conducting market research. The assessment would include the definition of the disease state for which the test is being developed and the format of the device, namely whether it is disposable or handheld, portable or transportable, benchtop, or intended for monitoring. Also required at this stage is a definition of what the device would be intended for, whether to improve medical and economic outcomes or to improve therapeutic turnaround time. The next step after defining the general category of the device is to conduct market analysis to define the unmet need that the device will address, the market size associated with that need, and any segments within the market that would be relevant. The market analysis will also cover an assessment of the competitive landscape, including companies that are providing solutions in the same category using similar technology, which would be direct competition, or using different technology, which would be indirect competition. Also included is the cost associated with the competitive tests. The market analysis will provide guidance on the desired product features and benefits, the potential market share that such product features could capture, and how the product would be positioned in the marketplace to maximize probability of commercial success. In addition to conducting market analysis as part of the screening exercise, it is also important to consider the stakeholders involved, what their needs are, and how the device would meet those needs. Among the stakeholders are the payers, whether public payers, namely Medicare and Medicaid, or private insurers. Clearly, if the test is not reimbursed, then its commercial success will be limited. Also, among the stakeholders are the care providers who are the users of the test. These could be, for example, physicians, nurse practitioners, clinics, or test labs. As an example, the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services, also called CMS, is the body that establishes reimbursement criteria for lab tests based on codes ascribed to the test. If the proposed concept being considered falls in an already established code, then the path for getting reimbursement for the test would be much easier than otherwise. Usually, the private insurers follow the guidelines established by CMS. Therefore, considering the needs of these stakeholders early in the development process and incorporating features in the design that would favor reimbursement will facilitate successful commercialization of the point-of-care device. An important part of stakeholder analysis is clearly defining user needs, which will be converted into product feature specifications. There are several ways that user needs can be determined. A survey of potential users is a good tool by which specific needs can be identified. The survey could be in the form of a questionnaire that potential users are asked to fill out. Another way of identifying user needs is to develop physical models of the device and present them to the prospective users, and then conduct interviews to determine which features would be desirable and why. Finally, it is important to conduct human factor studies which focus on how the user will interact with the device. The device has to be designed in such a way that the probability of making an error during use is minimized. For example, if the device has an LCD display and it has several buttons that change the content of the display, then human factor studies will involve trials with potential users to determine the optimum combination of display and pushes of buttons that will convey the intended information on the display as unambiguously as possible. This finding would then be converted into requirements for the software that will be developed for the display. The FDA is particularly concerned about safety issues arising out of improper use of medical devices caused by suboptimal product design. After the user needs are identified, they are clearly documented and the information is used to define features in the device that would meet the user needs. After conducting market assessment and stakeholder analysis, the target product profile is defined. The profile will capture the requirements for safety and efficacy, which are the key criteria that the FDA considers during approval of a medical device. Also included in the product profile are requirements for convenient use, differentiating features of the product, the cost target, and a matrix of the needs of the key stakeholders and the features incorporated in the device that would meet those needs. This target product profile becomes a living document and is updated at regular intervals during the development process, usually after design reviews. It becomes the focus of all development effort, and it ensures that at the completion of development, all the important product requirements are met. The general requirements in the target product profile are converted into specific technical requirements to generate the preliminary product requirements or preliminary product specifications. These can be thought of as the target that the product development process will try to achieve. Feasibility testing is then conducted by designing prototypes, building, and then testing them. Feasibility may involve a few iterations with design modifications to arrive at a version that has the highest likelihood of meeting the preliminary specifications. At this stage, it is normal to encounter specs that cannot be readily met without modifications. In that case, the specs are modified, and if any of these modified specs have implications with respect to the product profile, then the product profile is updated accordingly. Clearly, the important consideration is that the user needs will continue to be met by the updated product profile. One of the important goals of a product development effort is to ensure that the product can be protected from competitors by developing an intellectual property fence around it. As part of that effort, a prior art search is conducted to determine what is unique about the device design and how it can be protected by applying for patents. This search also provides information about the competitor patent landscape and what open areas are available to be claimed, generally referred to as freedom to operate or FTO. Demonstration of feasibility in stage 2 leads to the third stage of product development, which involves a systematic development and execution of a multidimensional plan. Included in product development is a technical development plan involving design, manufacturing, and risk analysis, the regulatory strategy, the intellectual property or IP strategy, the clinical testing plan, if clinical testing will be required for validation of the device design, the plan for positioning the product in the market, the strategy for obtaining reimbursement for the product, and the launch plan. Overseeing all of these activities will be project management, whose role will be to ensure timely and on-budget completion of all activities leading to product approval and launch. Let us now consider each one of these items. This figure is a conceptual presentation of a design development plan including verification and validation. It is part of the FDA's guidance for design control. Essentially, as we have discussed earlier, the user needs are translated into design input or product requirements. The product design output resulting from the development process is then tested against the design input to ensure that the requirements are met. This is referred to as design verification. If the design output does not meet design input requirements, then the design is modified, the specifications updated accordingly, and the modified design is tested again. This cycle is repeated until the design output meets the design input requirements. It is important in this process that the manufacturability of the device is given due consideration to facilitate manufacturing and scale up in the future. What that means is that if the design presents significant manufacturing hurdles, then it needs to be modified to improve its manufacturability. Many teams tend to overlook manufacturability at this critical stage and then later pay the price in high manufacturing cost and poor yields. It should be noted that if the screening and feasibility work that precedes this stage have been done thoroughly, then design verification would involve perhaps no more than 1 or 2 iterations. In addition to verifying that the device meets the established specifications, it is also tested under conditions of intended use to ensure that the user needs are met and that the user can successfully use the device in a safe and effective manner. This is called design validation, which may involve testing in clinics or in test labs under simulated use conditions. Depending on the device and the intended use, there are specific protocols that may need to be followed in this design validation testing. The design input is an important document that details the specific requirements that the product will need to meet in order to satisfy user needs. Let us look at details of a typical design input document. The design input establishes the product requirements, which is the target that the development effort will be aiming for. The product requirements are as detailed as possible in order to facilitate objective and unambiguous performance evaluation of the design with respect to the requirements. The key elements of the product requirements are specific performance requirements, physical or size requirements, safety requirements, regulatory requirements, user requirements, and packaging requirements. An example may help in illustrating what these requirements might stand for. For example, if we consider a portable point-of-care HbA1c or glycated hemoglobin test device, the performance requirements for such a device might include minimum and maximum HbA1c values, the precision and the accuracy of those values. The physical requirements would include dimensions of the device, the size of the display, and the size of the sample port. The safety requirements might include features to prevent accidental finger sticking with the needle used for drawing the sample droplet of blood. The regulatory requirements might include immunity from electromagnetic interference and software validation. The user requirements may include ease of using the finger stick, ease of collecting the sample and introducing the sample into the port, and unambiguous display readings to prevent error in interpretation. Finally, the packaging requirements may include the size and type of packaging to ensure protection of the components and appropriate labeling on the packaging. From this example, it is apparent that the product requirements definition is a very detailed document. A part of design plan is risk assessment, which includes both bottom-up and top-down risk analysis. In the bottom-up process, also known as Design Failure Modes and Effects Analysis, or DFMEA, each device component is considered independently, and the consequence of failure of the component on the performance of the device is evaluated and given a ranking based on the probability of occurrence and the severity of the effect on the performance. This process helps to identify high-risk areas which then can be addressed by making the design robust so as to mitigate the risk. Likewise, the top-down process asks the following question: what kind of failures can occur at the system level? This is then traced down to the subassembly and to the component level to identify the possible cause and the risk associated with the failure. The risks are then mitigated through design modification or by developing unambiguous instructions for use. As mentioned earlier, the manufacturing process development should occur hand in hand with the design development. This is called design for manufacturability, and the approach ensures that the design is developed in such a way that manufacture of the device will not present major hurdles. This requires that the design and manufacturing teams work very closely together. Prototype manufacturing for testing involves learnings that are implemented in the further development of the manufacturing process. At this stage, it is also important to conduct process risk analysis in the form of Process Failure Modes and Effects Analysis, or PFMEA, which involves a process similar in concept to the design FMEA discussed earlier. The intent is to identify and mitigate high risks in the manufacturing process that could lead to safety, reliability, and efficacy issues in the performance of the device. A detailed cost model is part of the manufacturing activity, and it uses process, raw material cost, labor, and overhead information to develop cost estimates at different volumes and under different manufacturing conditions. The overall safety of the device is ensured by following a risk management process as mandated by regulatory requirements both in the US in the form of Quality Systems Regulation GMP or QSR GMP, as well as in Europe in the form of ISO 13485. Risk management essentially consists of risk analysis in the form we have just discussed, followed by implementation of risk mitigation and the assessment of residual risk to ensure that the residual risk is acceptable. This is then documented in the risk management report, and subsequently any changes to the device, process or package or label are evaluated with respect to their effect on the risk profile, and the changes are implemented only if the residual risk is acceptable. Another part of the product development activity is the regulatory strategy. This involves first classifying the device in accordance with regulatory guidance as Class 1, 2, or 3, depending on the risk associated with the use of the device. The device classification determines a regulatory approval path that will be necessary. Class 1 and Class 2 devices require a so-called 510K clearance path, and the higher risk Class 3 devices require a so-called pre-market approval or PMA path. The regulations define the requirements for approval along either one of these paths. The CLIA classification defines the complexity of device based on how it is used. There are three categories: complex, which applies to tests that require a well-trained technician to conduct the test; moderate, which applies to tests that require some training for conducting the test; and waived, which applies to tests that can be conducted without training in a home use environment. This classification determines the type and extent of testing that will need to be conducted to demonstrate safety and effectiveness of the device. Part of the regulatory requirements also involve registration of the manufacturing establishment with the FDA and also listing of the device with the FDA. The overall plan for regulatory approval would include the Quality Assurance Plan for compliance with Good Manufacturing Practices or GMP. In Europe, there is a similar requirement called ISO 13485. If a clinical study is required to get approval of the product, then an investigational device exemption or IDE is needed for conducting clinical trials with an unapproved device. Also needed is a draft labeling that includes all printed matter that will accompany the device when it is sold commercially. The CLIA complexity category will define the test plan that will need to be executed. The IP strategy will include an analysis of the prior art to determine freedom to operate or FTO, which defines the limitations to what can be included as features in the device without violating issued patents. Through that process, product features are identified that are unique and can be patented. Once the patents are granted, they serve as barrier to entry by competitors. The market analysis done in Stage 2 under product feasibility is further refined during product development and updated based on the developed product features and more detailed market analysis. The detailed market data and product information help to define how the product would be positioned in the marketplace. This would include product features and benefits, the uniqueness compared to competitive products, the value proposition, and the overall marketing plan. An important part of product development activities is the reimbursement strategy, which determines how the product, once commercialized, will be reimbursed by the payers such as Medicare, Medicaid, or private insurers. This graphic provides a perspective of the flow of the device from the innovator to the user and the stakeholders involved in the process. The device will be used by the physician or test lab or the hospital to conduct the test for the patient. Reimbursement will be provided by the insurance company or by Medicare or Medicaid. Considering all the stakeholders, the device development plan will incorporate features in the device and the test plan that will maximize the probability of reinforcement. Many development plans tend to overlook this important aspect of commercialization and then pay the price in the form of a long and arduous process for reimbursement approval and possibly suboptimal reimbursement for the device, which would adversely affect its commercial potential. The success of device product development depends on having an effective and efficient project management process. It involves management of the disparate activities of a cross-functional team, including design, manufacturing, marketing, quality, regulatory, clinical, intellectual property, and finance functions. The project manager ensures that all activities are aligned in the direction of achieving the project goals on time and on budget. Project management requires a seasoned project manager with clear roles and responsibilities assigned by management to help ensure meeting the project milestones. The project manager works with the team to develop a detailed plan, including activities, timelines, and budgets. Project or design reviews are conducted at appropriate stages to keep track of progress and make changes as needed to achieve the project goals. After the design development is completed, the design is tested to ensure that the design output meets the product requirements definition or the design input. This is called design verification, and it involves a detailed plan with specifics about what testing will be done, how it will be done, and what the success criteria will be. Successful completion of design verification is followed by design validation, which involves testing of the device in actual use environment, such as a test lab or clinic or hospital. This is called design validation, and like design verification, it involves a detailed plan with specifics of the testing and the criteria for success. Testing involving human subjects may require approval from the FDA prior to initiation of testing, and this is called Investigational Device Exemption or IDE. Through the IDE process, the FDA ensures that testing of a non-approved device on human subjects does not expose the subjects to safety risks. Together, design verification and validation ensure that the product design meets all the requirements that were established early in the development process. After design verification and validation are completed, detailed information about the device design, the manufacturing process, and the test results are documented in a regulatory submission package. The format and content of the package are dictated by the regulatory requirements, with the 510(k) submission requiring less details than the PMA submission. After the package of information is submitted to the FDA for review of safety and effectiveness of the device, there may be a facility audit conducted by the FDA and/or the state, depending upon the prevailing state regulations. The FDA generally chooses to conduct facility audits for devices that are high risk, particularly in the Class 3 category. The standard period for review by FDA for a 510(k) application is 90 days, and it is 180 days for a PMA application. These time periods for review may be extended depending on how much additional information the FDA may require from the sponsor during the review period. Following product approval, the device is listed in the FDA registry, and the manufacturing facility is also registered with the FDA. The last step in commercialization is the product launch. The key elements that feed into the plan for the product launch are: number one, the forecast for the demand of the product over time, which helps the manufacturing group to build inventory of the product. The pricing strategy that establishes how the product will be priced depending on the different channels through which it will be commercialized. For example, direct sales, sales on the internet, sales through distributors, etc. Number three, the plan for sales and distribution. And number four, the overall plan for introducing the product to the market. In summary, the steps to commercialization of a point-of-care device involves multiple stages, starting from idea screening, followed by product feasibility testing, then product development, product design, verification and validation, regulatory approval, and product launch. The success of such a multifunctional effort is contingent upon the ability of project management to develop and execute a plan that ensures that all activities are aligned to meet the project goals on time and on budget. As mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, this was a high-level view of the steps toward commercialization of a point-of-care device.